Hello, I'm Dr. Afshan Hoyer. I'm a museologist and education expert. Today, I want to talk to you about the art of transformation. My talk will focus on the core of the experience of looking at art, what shapes the perceptions, interpretations, and meaning-making processes of the viewer, and how this can be turned into both an active and transformative learning experience. I will include examples from my research and practice working directly with museum goers as participants. Can art be a vector for change? What if people's connections with art could encourage positive change in perceptions, beliefs, and even society? Through engagement, critical reflection, dialogue, and transformative learning, it is possible. I begin with two basic questions. Can art trigger a transformative learning process, and do transformative learning experiences happen in the museum? My research and practice in various museums and in different cultural projects has shown that the answer is yes. Now let's address the nature of museum objects and meaning making. Objects are polysemic. Museums present objects, artifacts, and works of art for the public, who in turn observe them, reflect, and make meaning. Museums will often focus on presenting the significance of the object, its context, history, and meaning. The polysemic nature of objects is important, as this allows the viewer to see and feel different things while viewing the same object, as well as to construct multiple meanings. Here's an example from the Red Cross and Red Crescent Museum collections. We have a cup. We see a utilitarian object, a mass-produced aluminum cup used to drink from. However, let us not forget, this is a museum object, and it is part of the International Red Cross and Red Crescent Museum collections. Why? This cup tells a story. The cup is from Iraq, dating from the period 1985 to 1990. The historical context of the cup and its intended use evokes war, notably the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s. As Paul Bouvier states in his article, Prisoners' Objects, Art, Communication, and Humanity, in extremely harsh detention conditions where prisoners suffer from abandonment, isolation, deprivation, violence, and degrading treatment, an object or an artistic or intellectual activity can restore their dignity and assure their survival as human beings. This particular cup also has a personal story. This Iraqi army cup was engraved by an Iranian prisoner of war and given to the delegate, helping him to return to his home country. Suddenly, this object can be seen to represent human suffering as well as a release from suffering, becoming a symbol of survival and human dignity, as well as a gesture of gratitude. I'm showing you this cup today to display how intention or intended use is different from associated stories or meanings. Elaine Hoyman-Gurian explains that the meaning of an object in an exhibition can sometimes come from the associated story or associated history. She uses the example of a bowl, an object manufactured in huge quantities. A bowl that can be bought in any shop may not seem to be very significant. But if the label informs the museum visitor that this bowl comes from Auschwitz, the visitor automatically transfers their knowledge of the Holocaust to the object. Thus, the story of an object may be of fundamental importance in the object's meaning. Now, moving forward, let's keep in mind that we are talking about objects or artworks that are displayed in a certain context, the museum, within which individuals search for meaning when they are viewing them, and the vital importance of stories or associated meanings. Now, to focus on the art of transformation, I will attempt to answer three further questions by delving into research as well as methodology that I have used within specific cultural projects working directly with museum goers, or as I prefer to say, with participants as individual actors within meaning-making processes. So first, what is transformative learning? Next, how does transformative learning occur? And how do we foster these experiences? So what is transformative learning? Studying the reactions of women re-entering community college programs in the 1970s, Jack Mesereau outlined transformational learning. Transformative learning is a theory of adult learning that utilizes disorienting dilemmas to challenge participants' thinking. Individuals are then encouraged to use critical thinking and questioning to consider if their underlying assumptions and beliefs about the world are accurate. Transformative learning theory, considered a subset of constructivism, serves to explain the learning process of constructing and appropriating new and revised interpretations of the meaning of an experience in the world. In Transformative Dimensions of Adult Learning, Dr. Jack Mesereau, the founding father of the theory of transformative learning, attempts to redress the apparent oversight in adult learning theory that has resulted from a failure to recognize the central roles played by an individual's acquired frame of reference, through which meaning is construed and all learning takes place, and by the transformation of these habits of expectation during the learning process. From a transformative perspective and in alignment with the constructivist paradigm, meaning is considered to exist within each individual and is generated through the interpretation of experiences based on past experience with objects and people in the external world. Mesereau maintains that meaning making is central to learning and defines the meaning making process as such. As there are no fixed truths or totally definitive knowledge, and because circumstances change, the human condition may best be understood as a continuous effort to negotiate contested meanings. That is why it is so important that adult learning emphasize contextual understanding, critical reflection on assumptions, and validating meaning by assessing reasons. The justification for much of what we know and believe, our values and our feelings, depend on the context, biographical, historical, cultural, in which they are embedded. We make meaning with different dimensions of awareness and understanding. Mesereau defined the transformative learning process as having 10 steps or stages, beginning with a disorienting dilemma, then self-examination, then a critical assessment of assumptions, followed by recognition of a connection between one's discontent and the process of transformation, then an exploration of options for new roles, relationships, and action, planning a course of action, then acquiring knowledge and skills for implementing one's plans, a provisional trying of new roles, then building competence and self-confidence in new roles and relationships, and finally, a reintegration into one's life of the basis of conditions dictated by one's new perspective. How does transformational learning occur? What must happen for a person to change their view of the world? Mesereau believed that this occurs when people face a disorienting dilemma. Disorienting dilemmas are experiences that don't fit into a person's current beliefs about the world. When faced with a disorienting dilemma, people are forced to reconsider their beliefs in a way that will fit this new experience into the rest of their worldview. This often happens through critical reflection in the context of dialogue with other people. Here we must note the link that exists between transformative learning theory and humanitarian action. Both begin with a dilemma. Thus, the trigger for transformative learning is an acute internal and personal crisis or disorienting dilemma. Disorientation occurs when we encounter an experience that does not match our expectations or meaning structures, such as a profound and sudden life experience. However, research has also shown that triggering events can be both internal and external and may actually be part of a long cumulative process. According to Edward Taylor, transformation may also be triggered by integrating circumstances, such as the search for something that is lacking in an individual's current life, not necessarily always a life-threatening event. In order to delve into practice, I will use the work I did curating the section Dialogues on Humanity, designing the educational methodology and working directly with publics of all ages as part of the project Humanitarian Principles Here and Now. Humanitarian Principles Here and Now is a contemporary art installation produced by the Musée d'Élysée and the Swiss Ministry of Foreign Affairs in conversation with the International Committee of the Red Cross. The installation is currently traveling around the world. Through art, the project aims to allow people to take time to think, to feel, and to reflect on the humanitarian sphere. For the first section of the installation, a carte blanche was given to 10 Swiss photographers to reflect on and illustrate the humanitarian principles that are central to humanitarian action. For the second section, Dialogues on Humanity, 6 photographs were selected from the media, each capturing a moment in time with a specific context and story. The aim of this section is to invite visitors to explore their reactions, thoughts, and feelings, as well as points of view and personal experiences they're based on. The overall objective of Dialogues on Humanity is to use 6 carefully selected media photographs as a tool to encourage audiences to slow down the process of reading images, to stimulate an inner dialogue through personal reflection, and to inspire visitor participation in discussion, dialogue, and exchange about humanity. The presentation method of the photographs works hand in hand with the educational methodology used to foster transformative learning experiences. To summarize, these are the steps of my methodology for Dialogues on Humanity. Observation. First, visitors are free to explore the works on display, both looking at the details of the photographs as well as concentrating on their feelings and personal reactions. The images are purposefully displayed without the captions directly next to them in order to encourage critical reflection. The stories behind the images are purposefully displayed in such a way that visitors will consciously look for them after having viewed the installation content, perhaps inspired by curiosity and questions they may have. Not immediately providing the stories is therefore fundamental to the process. During the observation of the images, the individual is often drawn to a photograph, perhaps by a certain element, detail, emotional reaction to the image, or a question they may have about it. They connect with it. The observer then begins to think critically, asking questions such as, what am I looking at? And what does this image mean to me? And this can act like a mirror, awakening stories and experiences inside the individual. The transformative learner will then devise the story behind the image according to who they are and what knowledge and experiences they have, and thus construct a personal interpretation. We then introduce an opportunity for dialogue. What each individual sees and how they feel about what they see is shared along with the underlying reasons for their interpretation, which often includes a personal story. It is important to note that when an actual educator or mediator is not present for dialogue, this can also be an internal process for the viewer. Within the project, a digital platform is also available for sharing views and entering the conversation. Within the dialogue, the stories behind the images are brought into the conversation. Individuals are then incited to reflect on their original interpretations as well as those of others in relation to the stories behind the images. This is not to demonstrate that their personal interpretation is false. Rather, multiple interpretations exist and are considered valid. Reframing of interpretations may occur or not, depending on individual choice. In Dialogues on Humanity, after the reframing process, we brought in the humanitarian principles into the discussion in alignment with the objective of the project, which was to encourage reflection on humanity, impartiality, neutrality, and independence, and how they may apply to everyday life. Finally, we moved into the sharing of personal stories. Participants were asked if they would like to share a personal experience from their lives that came to mind when they looked at the image or spoke about it. These stories can also be shared via the project's digital platform. However, it's important to note that in other transformative learning experience I've devised, we move directly from the reframing process into personal stories. The transformative learning experience proposed in this way encourages visitors to construct meaning based on their prior knowledge, understandings, and experiences, to express their interpretations, points of view, and perspectives, and to reflect on the interpretations of others, then to reassess and reflect once again on their points of view and perspectives. In transformational learning theory, learning occurs in one of four ways: by elaborating existing frames of reference, by learning new frames of reference, by transforming points of view, or by transforming habits of the mind. According to Mezirow, the transformational learner will examine his or her own understandings, assumptions, beliefs, and understand the implications of his or her beliefs, explore an alternative set of beliefs, meaning scheme, and critically reflect on the validity of these meaning schemes. The objective of this type of experience is to lead the learner to be more open to perspectives other than their own, becoming more accepting of alternative viewpoints. According to Edward Taylor, transformation can occur through objective reframing, which is critical reflection on the assumption of others, or subjective reframing, critical reflection, self-reflection on one's own assumptions. Therefore, critical self-reflection is essential to the process of transformative learning. To explain in simple terms, facing new information or dilemmas, the transformative learner will reassess their initial understandings and points of view through critical reflection. They may build upon their past knowledge and understandings or revise them. This process can lead to changes in their perceptions as they integrate new information and new knowledge. In my PhD research, I devised a transformative learning scale to evaluate whether visitors' prior knowledge and understandings have remained the same, been reinforced, enhanced, or changed. The aim was to identify when learning served to significantly modify understandings or shift perspectives. A major shift is seen as perspective transformation. Perspective transformation is a revision of meaning structures from experiences. Meaning structures are the concepts, beliefs, judgments, and feelings that shape an interpretation of information. According to Mezirow, the transformation of meaning perspectives leads to a shift in worldview. Thus, through critical reflection on meaning perspectives, individuals can be led to adopt a more inclusive, differentiated, permeable, and integrated perspective. To summarize, Edward Taylor explains that transformative learning theory, considered a subset of constructivism, serves to explain the learning process of constructing and appropriating new and revised interpretations of the meaning of an experience in the world. The roots of Mezirow's transformational learning theory lie in critical pedagogy, and more specifically in Paulo Freire's theory of conscientization, which Mezirow understands as a critical consciousness leading to a more in-depth comprehension of the world. Why is this important in the humanitarian field? Encouraging visitors' engagement with art focusing on humanitarian themes can serve to alleviate the issue of distant suffering represented in the media by directly addressing the emotional reaction of the spectator to helplessness or distress. According to Mezirow, learning is defined as the process of using a prior interpretation to construe a new or revised interpretation of the meaning of one's experience as a guide to future action. Taylor explains the key to transformational learning is critical reflection on assumptions. Transformative learners can experience objective reframing, subjective reframing, as well as perspective transformation, simply defined as the revision of meaning structures from experiences. Mezirow claims that fostering transformative learning experiences can lead the learner to be more open to perspectives other than their own, becoming more accepting of alternative viewpoints. Finally, is the expanded definition of transformative learning proposed by Elizabeth Castle and Dean Ellis perceives the individual as a part of a human system. Transformative learning experiences can provide the possibility for an expansion of consciousness in any human system, thus the collective as well as the individual. This expanded consciousness is characterized by new frames of reference, points of view, or habits of the mind, as well as by a new structure for engaging the system's identity. In Castle and Ellis's view, transformation occurs when individuals must modify their personal identities in relation to the identity of the group. This allows us to recognize the evolution of both individual and group identities, as well as the effect learning has on group meaning perspectives and culture. Thus, the viewer's engagement in transformative experiences through art can therefore not only promote critical reflection on personal views, as well as the views of others, each individual can also be encouraged to question his or her own role in humanity and to actively engage in bringing about positive change in society as a whole. Thank you for listening.